guys, Brad Chappell back with you, Crappie Connection. We got a little special topic we're going to talk about this afternoon, and we're going to talk about casting to open water fish, but also fish on structure coming into the fall. Let you guys do a little introduction to yourself.
I'm Chad Wright from Madison, Mississippi.
I'm Hayden Jefferies.
And we all get to fish the same body of water a lot. I know we see each other all the time on the lake, and I know Chad, he does a lot of casting. Usually when I see Chad out there, I know he's got a casting pole, and he'll let me know, hey, they're biting them today or they're not, as far as the casting goes.
If you see me with the long pole, times are tough. So.
Tough times for Chad.
Yeah,
He's got the long pole.
Pretty much.
And I believe that. I mean, you pretty much cast every month.
Just about, year round.
Let's go kind of through your basic setup, and we'll kind of start on that forte when it comes to casting to these crappie up in open water, size of jigs, and kind of how you determine different sizes of jigs whenever you going out and cast it to them.
Man, there's basic. If you ever looked at my boat, I probably have 7 to 8 casting poles in there, and all of them are set up kind of different. Most of them, I do have pretty much 6-pound fluorocarbon line on all of them. That's pretty important. It don't hold the memory, so it lets you cast better. Once the line starts getting memory in it, I'll stretch it out, or I'll make Charlie walk across the yard and hold some tension in it, or either change it altogether. But that's one of the biggest things, is making sure your line doesn't have memory in it. Because if it looks like a slinky when it comes out, you're not going to cast very accurate.
What's a good tip you would say as far as putting line on a reel? You got a little trick up your sleeve?
Yeah, I use the K9 line.
Yeah.
On every one of their spools, whichever way the label's facing, lay it down. And the way it comes off that spool, it's going on your reel right.
I was hoping you was going to say this, because that's how I put mine on. So I was like, man, I hope you don't say something different than
That's always been tricky.
Yeah.
You spool a reel, you get done, and then you let go of the line, and it all just bundles up.
Yeah, when you're spooling it on, you hold it tight. If you can let it go, and if you're putting it on backwards, it starts winding up on you. You can tell, and all you got to do is turn the spool around. But on the K9 line, every one of their spools I've gotten so far, as long as the label is laying flat on the carpet, you're spooling it on right. That's the biggest thing, is making sure it comes. I don't know if it's coming off the spool the same direction or the opposite direction, but that's the way to keep it.
I try to spool it back, what I would think, back on the same way it come off. You kind of fight it. If you put it on wrong, what could you do?
I'll make make Charlie hold on to it and walk it across the yard, and she'll hold it tight, and I'll reel it up 3 or 4 times and just kind of straighten it out.
On the lake, and it's mistaken. I make a mistake, and then put it on there wrong. I have cast it out of the boat, put the boat in gear, and just about let that whole thing back out and re-spool it back up, and that kind of.
As you're idling, you can put with no jig on it, you can lay the tip in the water and open your bell up, and it'll suck. As you go, it'll pull the line off, and then you can reel it back on there too. So you can pull it, you can watch it maybe just till you get to the very end and stop the boat and reel it back up. And
I mean, that's a basic thing.
If you're stuck on the water, that's
you got to learn it.
I
mean, it's
yeah, because it is hard to cast a rod that is spooled backwards.
Yeah, instead of casting it all out there, you put the tip in the water and drag it as you idle. It'll pull the line off with no jig on it. And I think it'll take the memory out better that way than with the jig on it, because it can all spin off as you
free spool. Let's say
pretty much. So, and I do have a couple poles that I usually have some braid on. I like braid. If the wind's not blowing, if the wind's blowing and you're casting a light jig, a braid is going to be disaster for us over with. It's going to knot up on you. But a heavier jig, it's kind of what I put on the couple braided poles I have. Mainly if they're down in tops or toward the bottom or something I can get down to them quick and not worry about my line breaking. I like the braid part as far as the line not breaking, but casting a light jig into wind, it's a recipe for disaster or then it's going to knot up on you.
So that would be one of the disadvantages to braid.
To braid, yep. Now, if you're casting a 1/8, 1/4, something like that, the braid is fine. Once you get to a 1/16 or anything lighter than that, if the wind's blowing, it's going to knot up on you eventually.
Do you prefer braid or mono or fluorocarbon?
I fish fluorocarbon. Even when I'm casting, I'm going to cast.
I know you got casting poles, don't you?
I got some casting poles.
I know you do. I've seen them in there.
Yeah, I've played with that some. It's a fun way to fish.
I like the bait caster. I got a couple bait caster poles.
Man, that's a whole nother skill.
I do use them a lot too. Once you figure that out, the fall of the jig, the way you can make the jig fall in the water is totally different than a bail rod. The jig, you can almost make it fall directly straight down. On a bail rod, the way it comes off out of the bail, it's pulling the jig to you a little bit as it falls. But with the bait caster, you can.
Have you
I've got one of them. I've played with it some.
Was it BDS? Is it what?
No, bait.
BFS?
BFS.
Bait finesse reel, yeah.
System. I don't know where that comes from.
Yeah, bait finesse reel, I think is what it's called. So
I played with them, but I can tell you,
it's a tricky cast to kind of get the feel of.
You don't really cast it like you do a regular bass. You lob it, yeah. You just.
And you have to do it sidearm, don't you?
No.
Throw it over the top.
Can you throw it up?
Yeah,
it's just a lob. You can't try to force the bait to go where you want it, or it's going to backlash every time.
You can't.
You have to let the jig almost pull the line out of the rod.
I know I played with them, and I'm talking. That is not my skill set.
And I can only do braid on them. No, I can't.
Really?
I can't. Can you cast fluoro on it?
No. I can actually remember when I first got it and I tried to throw it. I called him. I was like, "Hey, how do I use this thing?" And he started walking me through it. He's like, "You got to make sure your spool tensioner's set to where it's right, and you have to lob it." And I was out there in the yard every day just trying to figure out how to.
I went through $100 worth of fluoro cutting it off with backlashes before I finally figured out that I can't cast it. I have to put braid on it. And I do put a leader on or something sometimes, but those both have braid on them at all times because I can't cast anything else on it.
What about on that braided line? I know you said on the fluorocarbon like 6-pound test. What about the braided size? Somebody brave enough to go out there.
I think it's 10-pound test. Just
to
in any kind. I just whatever I pick up. I haven't found any special braid, but
is there advantage over using braided line compared to fluorocarbon or a mono? Or
I mean, I don't very rarely use a net, so your line don't break when you flip them in or whatever.
I notice a lot with that 6-pound fluorocarbon, you'll break a fish off just when he hits the deck or whatever, when you swing him in and he flops and it'll pop it.
So,
what is the, in your mind, the perfect scenario when you would choose casting over long bowl? Both of you guys can answer it.
I love, as far as casting, if they're in the open water, that's what I'm going for. And I will cast to them or do cast to them on timber and tops and stuff, but I'd much rather fish for one in the open water. So perfect scenario would be, no wind.
Today was like that. No wind.
Fish, 8-footish down, somewhere in that range, something where you can use a light jig, but yet still get down to them. And sitting still. That's perfect when they're just hovering out there in the 6 to 8 foot range.
Would you?
I don't pick up a casting rod a lot. I'm very partial to my longer pole, but when the fish are really grouped up, if it's 75, 100 fish, I feel that you're going to catch more of those fish sitting off of them, and then clear water, I'm going to have to cast to them. Those fish aren't going to let you get up there close. And then black crappie, it seems like they prefer to eat that bait coming that way over straight up, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Coming across?
Yeah.
I know. For me, I usually cast and I switch up, the way I fish throughout the year. For me, I'm using a long pole more in the wintertime where it's more you have to kind of have that bait sitting in their face for a longer period of time. And we started casting this year at postponed fish, when it's a little bit scattered out, and they're starting to get on wood a little bit more. Now, standing timber, I do not cast that. I don't know how in the world to do that.
Yeah, I've never
If I want to
been
lose
good at
some
that.
jigs, I can go to standing timber.
I will go through some jigs, but I'll choose timber over top. Tops is my last resort most of the time.
Really?
Yeah. So I like open water, then
I like
timber,
open water slide, but
and
don't
then
extend the
tops.
timber.
So, but
So with the timber, I'm guessing, you're having to cast to one side or the other,
Yeah.
and you're almost just hoping that fish sees it as it's coming by. Because if you throw over the top of it, it's hung every time.
yeah,
That's where I usually hit it, right over the top.
I've tried casting in
And-
timber, and I had to set it down pretty quick. It's
most of the time it's opposite too. Wherever the fish is, you'll look like he's on the left side, and I'll cast the left side, but the next one I'll cast to the right side. It seems like just about every time.
You think he's facing that timber and seeing the jig coming on
Yeah,
the side?
I think he's more toward the back of the tree,
Uh-huh.
and he's seeing it on the left side. I think I'm going by his tail. I can't really tell from that far out. But, so on the right side, he's seeing it as it goes to the back or front of that tree.
So I guess that brings up a question. What is your optimal range as far as what you're casting at? So you see a fish, when are you going to make that first cast, and when do you feel that you make your most accurate cast at that fish?
On timber,
Ooh.
probably 30 feet. No further than that, or I'm getting hung. Now open water, 40 to 50. On a good day, when there's no wind and current.
Right.
That's the tricky part about the reservoir. There's wind and there's current, so depending on how deep they are, the open water can get tricky out there.
On your range, on your unit, and when you set it down, and I asked Hayden the question earlier, you set down in the morning time, you're getting ready to go look for some, we'll say fish on stumps, which is a bunch of fish on submerged stumps right now. Where do you set your distance out when you begin? And when do you, like Hayden said, when do you feel like, all right, that's my range, and I want to start casting to them?
I guess if I'm looking for the stumps or whatever, it'd be 60, 65 foot.
Mhm.
But if they're on the timber like that, it's going to be at 40. That's pretty much what I keep it at.
Do you ever come below 40 whenever you're casting?
Very rarely. So, sometimes on tops, especially the deep tops, I will, because I'm casting, but before you know it, I'm 10 feet from it. So I'm
Almost pitching.
I'm pitching with just a shorter pole. So I'll zoom it in to probably 35 is as close as I'll zoom it into. Maybe 30, but 35.
Yeah.
I'll bump it in one more time.
For me, like, a lot of the spots I've got marked on my unit, and I pretty much know where I'm going. Every now and then I'll get to go play fish and get to go explore, which I love doing. And then I'll set my range out to that, 100, really 140.
Just looking for that piece of structure.
And everybody says, well, what do you see that for? And all I'm seeing, usually I wouldn't try to do that if there's a lot of contours, a lot of ups and downs on the bottom. I'm looking for a flat, and I'm looking for a structure. I'll set it out to that 100, 120, 140 even. And I'm looking for a blip off the bottom that's all the way to the bottom, and you can spot it. But for me, I try not to, whenever I'm casting, I'm not going to bring my screen any closer than 40. And then I want that target piece of structure or fish between that 20 and 40. And that kind of leads me to transducers. I know that's a big question, which one you guys prefer casting. I know what you probably prefer, long poling.
It's a 32 all the way, no matter what I'm doing.
Oh, really?
Have
you used the 34 much?
I've got one on my boat, and I'll hook it up every now and then and look at it, and I quickly switch back.
See, I struggle with the 32 casting.
I go back and forth daily. So I got them both on there where I can flick them back and forth. I think the biggest thing is, the 0 degree. My 32, my 32 is actually on the barrel, not the shaft, but the barrel of my trolling motor.
Uh-huh.
And as far as that's the most accurate way to put it. It's straight down your trolling motor on there. I mean, if you put it on your on your shaft, you may have it cocked to the left
Yeah.
or cocked to the right. With a long pole, at 10 feet, you're straight down the middle of your trolling motor. But at 30 feet, it's kind of like a rifle scope. It may be 2 or 3 feet to the left or 2 or 3 feet to the right.
Yeah.
And you have to learn. You have to get it sighted in pretty much. Now the 32 is on the barrel, so when I'm having trouble, if the wind's blowing or whatever, I'm having trouble hitting them with my 34. I'll switch to 32 because I know it's
Straight.
It's
Throwing
straight.
straight.
It's sighted in dead down the middle.
That makes sense.
My 34 is on the shaft, so and I guess last week it went out, so I put a new one on Friday, and Monday, man, I had fits with it just because I have it cocked. It's cocked to the left just a little bit more than what I'm used to for the past 2 years that I've been using it.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got home, I adjusted it a little. I hadn't been back out since, but I mean, it may be a quarter of an inch that I have it off,
Yeah.
but out at 50 feet, it's a
Moving
lot.
feet.
I was missing them left and right, so I flipped back to my 32 because it's just not what I was used to. I have to.
It's amazing how
Resight
well
it
that
in.
name comes in, scope, and we've talked about it a couple times today. Sighting it in.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to get out there with these live scopes and actually sight them in, because Chad just said it. His was cocked to the left a little bit, maybe a quarter of an inch. It could be an eighth of an inch.
It may not be that much. I don't know. I know when I was tightening it up, I saw it kind of pulling to one side, and I stepped back and looked. I was like, that's going to be fine, but it's not. I mean, when I got out there Monday, it was way off. I mean,
Yeah, I know mine shoots to the left a little bit, so
Mm-hmm.
I always tell people just a tad to the left of there.
Just a touch. Mine's
Just
the
a
same
touch. Do you think it's and I guess long pole would show a lot, but casting as well, mounting on the left side or the right side of the trolling motor shaft?
I don't know.
Or is
I've
it
always had
mounts?
mine on the left, so I don't know.
For a long pole, I've always said mount it on whichever side you're going to be holding that pole with, just because
Mhm.
it feels like it lines up a little bit better for you.
Yeah, see, I sit on the left-hand side of the boat, even when I'm by myself.
You're
and,
right-handed?
and I'm left-handed.
Oh, really?
So I'm casting, down to the. I fish. I catch most of my fish are kind of to the right of the boat for some reason. I don't
See,
know
you
why.
to me,
So I'm
I
looking
think
down-
You'd be on the right.
You're looking down the bracket of the trolling motor almost.
Yeah, but I'm looking at an angle to the right. I'm casting.
Okay, yeah.
Very
you sit
rarely.
on the right side of the boat.
If there's two people, yeah. I'm going to sit on the right side, but the transducer's still on the left. But I'm putting the person fishing on the left side just like that.
See, I'm right-handed, and I like sitting on the left side of the boat. And my thought is, as I'm casting out and I'm coming back reeling, I don't know, I can just line it better. I guess just because I'm right-handed, down
Line it
the
up
shaft,
down the-
coming back
yeah.
to me straighter. And one of the mistakes that I have a lot of times when people are on the boat and casting, like I said, I've been casting now for the last 4 months. I think I had a long pole once in my boat in the last 4 months. But when you cast out, one of the things that if you're just beginning, that you really want to do is you want to have that rod tip directly in that path of coming back to the boat. And I see people all the time, they'll cast and they'll have the pole kicked out 3 or 4 feet on the right side of the trolling motor. And I always try to tell them, hey, have that rod tip as close to the trolling motor way it's pointing as well, because
Right.
you might not think of it, but if you're
If you're to
4
the
or
right, you're
5
just pulling it through the beam
That's
instead
right.
of to
You're
the
not
beam.
keeping it coming down straight of the beam. So that, to me, that would be a big tip on people when they're wanting to cast, is have that rod tip the same direction as that arrow is facing. So if you're casting to the left and line it up like you would a scope, always keep in mind the term scope,
Yeah.
gun.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we won't
Because
get
it,
bleeped.
it may be sighted in at 10 feet out with your long pole, but when you start trying to cast at 30, 40, 50 feet, it's going to be, maybe further to the left or the right, and more than likely, mine's always to the left too a little bit. I don't know if you can get it right down the center, except unless it's on the barrel. And if it's on the barrel of the trolling motor, it's down the center. That's the most accurate way. But as far as casting, if you want to line it up, put it on the barrel.
I know there's all kind of brands, and I really don't, my mindset is get in there and feel which one feels best and kind of what size jigs you want to use as far as that end. But do you have a particular length of pole that you prefer over the other? Or?
I like 5.5 and 6 foot. I like the shorter poles. So I've tried some 7 foot poles. I have some. I like the
You're
I
more
like the short
comfortable
ones.
with the short
I can whip them little short ones out there, and I probably have one. It's one you gave me.
Maybe.
A 7 foot pole. Yeah. That's the only 7 foot pole I got in there.
I started with a shorter 5.5, 6 foot, 6.5 foot, and I didn't really get comfortable until I picked up the 7 footer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like a little bit whippier rod, to where I can kind of flick that. I don't know. That's interesting.
Yeah, because there's I see some guys using 5.5 footers, and I've seen a couple guys cast with 9 footers.
Yeah.
And I
Eight,
do.
9.
I'll let Charlie. She casts with it's a 10 footer. And
Oh wow!
And
Charlie's.
That's my daughter. Yeah. And I'll cast with that one too. Like I'll put if the wind's bad, you can put a heavy jig on that one, 1/8 or 1/4, and I'll cast that booger just as far as you can see it, and you can control it. Like a heavy jig, you can make it fall slow with that 10 foot pole.
Because you have more play.
Because you have more play. Yeah. And if they're down deep, or you can open the bail and let it go fast. But if that wind's blowing, I'll cast with that 10 foot all day long. A heavier jig, because you can cast into the wind and be more accurate, but I can slow it down. If I cast a 1/8 or 1/4 that 6 foot pole, it's going to the bottom. So
what would be some of the mistakes you see guys do whenever they're out there casting? Not naming me or anything, but
I've had a couple that, first of all, you got to go by yourself to learn it. When
not like long pole.
Yeah, if you're going with someone else if they're driving, you don't have to go by yourself, but you have to be driving the trolling motor. I wouldn't recommend somebody new for open water fish especially, because it's hard to tell which way the boat's drifting and which way the fish is drifting. It's kind of like duck hunting or dove hunting or something. You got to figure out the drift to lead them almost. If they're down deep, because if you're moving, and you cast right on them, by the time it gets down to them, the jig's going to drift to the left or right. So that's the hardest part. Somebody starting out, I would say tops and timber as they can see. Practice on that.
And you're good for the jig manufacturers.
Or some tops, just so they can, those fish aren't moving.
Yeah.
So they know where that top is, so they can cast over it and watch the jig fall. And the open water ones, they're a little tougher, especially if they're moving or if the wind or the current. You kind of have to. I don't know. You almost don't cast directly at them sometimes. You have to lead them. Yes, the boat drift. The boat drift is what messes you up, as far as pulling your jig to the left or the right. So.
And I know you normally don't think about somebody using brakes a whole lot, and we're talking the trolling motors in the back, but I know you've got them. How important it is for you when it comes to casting?
Very. I use them more going forward than I do going backwards.
Huh.
I'll use it to push me forward to make the jig fall faster.
I got you.
And I would say I use them way more going forward than I do stopping me.
I've learned to use them whenever I'm casting and getting somebody new in the boat that's not, all that experienced. But if they're not having that right presentation, if they're reeling it too slow, because a lot of people are real slow, just thinking, and I can hit it in reverse
and pull those
jigs. It's something that's helped me out on that aspect, but it kind of goes back to the same token. If they're reeling too fast and I see, all right, I want that jig to actually fall down a little bit further.
You could push forward.
I can push it forward.
And it's hard to explain, but it's part of the boat control stuff. Like when the wind is pushing you or whatever, and they're down deep, one fish that you're trying to target, and you need to move forward. Whenever you use the front trolling motor, it messes your line of your boat up for some reason. I guess it kicks the front of it around. I don't know how to explain it. And you're going to miss that fish. But if I bump the back trolling motor, if I use them to push me forward, for some reason it keeps me lined up.
Yeah.
Even though the boat's drifting, I can move myself forward with the back ones. But if I move myself forward with the front trolling motor, I don't know why. I can't even explain why, but it messes. You're not lined up with it anymore. By the time the jig gets down there, you've missed it. So.
And like I said, I think of originally, and it is a big game changer for long pole. And I mean, Hayden was telling me forever, I don't know why you ain't got brakes yet on your boat, and you use it with long pole. You're like, man, this is the cat's meow with boat control, but it's played a big key to me on, like I said, for me, it's a lot of times I'm pulling it back to make it jig speed up when I need it to rise it up some. So it's little tricks like that can help you catch more fish at the end of the day. That's just so weird with crappie fishing, and I think about all these different things that I've always talked about with different guys on here, but it really don't dawn on to you until you see somebody else do it or talk about it or actually put it to use on water. But you can use these brakes and pull that boat back a little bit and change the
I just figured out the forward part here in the last few months, actually. I don't know what I went forward with them for some reason instead of moving myself.
Hit the wrong thing.
And instead of you going forward with the front trolling motor, and I noticed then that the jig stayed lined up on him. Usually when the wind's hitting you and it's pushing you to the side or whatever, you're going to miss them with casting, because it just it changes the angle of everything. But it doesn't whenever you push yourself up with the back trolling motors. I don't know why, but
in your mind, what would be some of the advantages? And I know both you guys are partial to different ways, but what is some of the advantages of casting, and what would be some of the disadvantages to casting?
Advantages, especially, like you said, when they're grouped up, you can sit back off of them and not scatter them. Just keep picking them off. And when the fish are spooky, you can stay off of them.
Shallow, spooky fish.
Yeah, shallow, even deep spooky. So I mean, one day last week on the reservoir, they were hearing the jig hit the water. Just gone. So I could cast, 20 feet past them, 30 feet past them, and, then bring it to them. Disadvantages, whenever they're finicky, it's, whenever y'all are having to hold it on their nose.
Yeah.
And, it's a little tougher then. And, of course, I'll catch 2 or 3 of them with a long pole, and then I'll put it down and start casting to them again every time. So some days when they're like that,
I know you got
I could catch a lot more of the long poles when they get like that, but I don't know.
Anything pops in your mind, disadvantages, advantages?
I'm going to say a disadvantage. It always kind of scared me casting at a big fish, because what if that big fish wasn't quite willing enough to actually pursue that bait and come eat it? Whereas, with the long pole, you might have been able to keep it there that extra second longer, and the fish want to bite it. I feel like big fish can be lazy a lot of times.
Yeah.
They don't want to jump out and chase a bait 20, 30 feet. They kind of want to,
And you get more chances at them, too, now with casting.
I agree there.
A lot of times long pole, you get one shot and you're one and done on a big fish like that. With the long pole, with the short pole, like I said, I have 7 or 8 poles. I'll cast, and I can kind of judge the reaction. Like, he didn't like that big bait, or that I'll throw it on the floorboard and grab another one, different style, different color, something, and put them in. I'll cast them in all day long.
Just on a regular jig head or what?
I want a regular jig head or on a jig. I'll tip a jig with and cast it. In a tournament, I'm just play fishing, but you can get 3 or 4 different jigs in front of them if you have everything right there handy to present them to see kind of how they react, I guess. So that's another kind of advantage of it.
One thing I can't wait, and I seen Hayden actually do a Facebook post last week, and he wouldn't tell me where he saw it at, But the big packs of fish that are starting, they're going to group up here real shortly. Probably by the time this podcast is out. And actually, everybody knows Chad Rogers. He kind of come up with a terminology, I guess, wolf packs.
Wolf packs.
And it, I don't know, I like it. I like the terminology for them.
I don't ever see them on the res like that, like in big schools.
I don't see it in open water very often.
Yeah, I'm from Louisiana, and some of those lakes over there in the wintertime, like, it's schools of 50, 75, 100. They're good fish, and you can follow them around all morning and just...
I think you see that a lot more with black crappie.
And most of these are black, and these are clear water, but there's whites too, but they just, I mean, it's huge schools of them. And
3 years ago, out of Oxbow in Mississippi, I seen them do it in December, and it was black and white crappie, and literally they were only about 5 foot suspended up, and I think they were 10, 15 foot of water. But literally, I got to stay back off of those fish.
That's fun.
And I don't. It was. I don't know. I ain't gonna say we had 62 pounders, but we had 60 really good fish off of this one school because we were able to stay back off them a little bit and just keep fishing for them, And you would think sometimes they would spook off because you're catching a fish, and it kind of excites them sometimes. I think if you catch
Seeing
them,
those fish leave the group.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, something's going on. I better get in the party here.
Ours don't school up over here, like they do in open
Not
water.
that big a school. They hadn't
I see
noticed
3
it
or
here.
4 here. It's about as many as I ever see, really. But
Hayden had a big old school last week.
They were on structure. There was a tree next to them there, so they were related.
They were next to. And I did see it 2 weeks ago. Some shallow flats, not those giant schools, but I'm talking.
I have seen them 2 or
8.
3 ganged up 2 or 3 or 4 fish here the last couple of weeks.
But 8 to 12 fish together, and they were really close to structure, but they had, I don't know if they just kind of moved off of it for the moment, but it seemed like they're back on structure now. But I know as this water starts cooling, probably I'm gonna say in that low 80s to high 70s range. They seem to do it around here for me. They'll kind of get in those wolf packs, and cast is definitely, if you haven't tried it yet and you've got live scope, it's definitely a fun way to go out. And what I like about it is, say I can put somebody next to me in the boat and both of us are fishing at the same time. You may be like, all right, you try this color, you this style bait, and I'm gonna try this style and this style. And so that's one of the things I really like about casting, because both of them people can fish at the same time, and it's real hard to do with a long pole.
Almost impossible.
I mean, I don't, because it seems like, and I've done it, you're running each other's lines and pole tips, and like, I don't know if that's your jig or my jig, but casting, you're like, poof, shooting nonstop with a 6-shooter almost.
Yeah.
I like it just because there's no rhyme or reason pretty much every day that you can, one pole I'll have a 1/16 on with a certain color or style, and another one I'll have a 1/24 on or a 1/32, something like that, and it's just challenging to see which pole they're going to bite today, and then as soon as they do bite that one, I'll put a different color on, see if they'll bite that one better. I won't ever be satisfied with whatever that I catch one on. I'll start changing around.
Do you normally do one jig or 2 jigs?
I do one, just one. So
I normally use 2 because of people.
Now I have found too, especially helps in the wind, when you're casting a 1/8, and a 1/8's too fast for them to bite or whatever. It's called sonar balls. I think that's what it's called. They rattle, but I don't really care about the rattle. But they float also. But I'll peg them, 12 inches above that 1/8, and especially on that 10-foot pole. I always have a sonar ball on that 10-foot pole of ours. But that sonar ball slows it down a lot. So when it's windy, you can still cast into that, and it gives it a little extra weight when you cast it. So it works good on the bait caster rods too. It gives it weight casting, but slows it down in the water. So I use them a lot on the reservoir, just because it makes it easier to cast a heavier jig. But seems like a lighter jig going through the water to them. So
What about bladed jigs?
about another month here, October, November.
They get a little aggressive
Mm-hmm.
out there hunting.
So back in Louisiana, I tried some a few weeks ago. They were biting them there already. I tried the little double bladed jigs, Bobby Garland, and the ones on top, the black crappie, they were smacking them. The ones in the open, they were white crappie. They weren't ready for them
lazy.
yet. Yeah. So another, end of October-ish when it starts cooling down, I use them pretty good bit then. So.
Yeah, I like bladed jigs when they're aggressive. It can kind of helps them kind of locate them. And I'm telling you guys, if you haven't tried casting, it's another way to group crappie fishing. And I think of all the different ways, and I think tournaments definitely long poles the ticket. But plate fishing, you got another buddy want to go with you. Fish at the same time. I think casting is definitely a great way to get out there and do that. And even if you're, teaching somebody what you're doing, it can help out. But appreciate both of you guys coming on today.
Thank you.
It was a fun deal. Entertaining as always. And but make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Follow both of these guys. They're on Facebook and everything else as well. Appreciate you guys coming on as usual. Till next time, Brad Chappell,
Chad Wright,
Hayden Jefferies.
holla.
About a mile from the big muddy river, a place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel my words